The microbiome is a huge frontier of medicine right now. My guest today is Leo Grady. He is the CEO of Jona Health, and they are combining AI and the microbiome to deliver a product in the wellness space to people so that they can have their microbiome tested, and the entire microbiome literature is searched for exactly what's in their microbiome to give them incredibly personalized, actionable insights that they can go away with and optimize their health. It sounds like science fiction. It isn't. It's here. It's right now. They launched last week. And Leo himself is a heck of a guy to have done this. So electrical engineer by background, has always been excited by AI, has done a PhD in it back in 2003, I think, and was the CEO of Paige.ai, if you want to look them up. Raised $200 million to do AI in pathology. That company went from strength to strength while he was there, was part of a fund, entrepreneur in residence at a fund, and is now going to be CEO of Jona Health. They've got ambitions to be clinical grade. They've got ambitions to be used by things like pharma companies that want to test, the effects of drugs on the microbiome and things like that. But also, interestingly, the food and beverage industry, where you can see a world where a big food and beverage company might go to a company like this and say, hey, we want to have these effects on people. We want to reduce anxiety. We want to reduce inflammation in the gut. We want to increase this behavior, whatever it is, that all can be done by the microbiome, by the way, which we know very little about. We do know just it has a huge effect on physical and mental health. But there is a world where drinks companies, food companies can go with a specific ask in mind and work with them to create it. Who knows what world that might lead us to be in, but things might be a heck of a lot more evidence-based when it comes to claims that food and drink can do a certain thing. Anyway, this is an awesome episode. Hope you enjoy it. Leo certainly knows his stuff, has got a great company. So yeah, hope you enjoy it. Hey everybody, this week I'm joined by Leo Grady, and he's internationally recognized for his work to deliver AI in healthcare for 20 years at pioneering Bay Area startups like HeartFlow, multinational medical companies like Siemens, and most recently as CEO of Paige.ai. And as CEO of Paige, Leo led the company to being an industry leader, internationally launching products and receiving the first ever FDA approval for an AI product in pathology. Leo is currently CEO in residence with Breyer Capital and the founder and CEO of Jona, which we are going to talk a little bit about today. But Leo, welcome to the Healthtech Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm really good. Thanks for having me, James.
You're very welcome. It's a heck of a background you've got. I'm looking forward to getting into it greatly. If there was ever a person built for the Healthtech Podcast with your background, the things that you've done and the things you're about to do, I think it would be you. So I'm very much looking forward to getting into it with you. Before we do, where are you based? Whereabouts are you speaking to us from today?
I'm in the New York City area.
Excellent.
Technically Connecticut, but we're based in New York.
Yeah, it looks absolutely beautiful outside your window for anybody watching this on YouTube. Can see that too. But yeah, great. Leo, listen, the way that we start these podcasts is for you to tell your story. Now, as I say, very decorated, lots to this. But where does this all begin for you? Are you someone who had their first company at the age of 3 while selling something to their siblings and exited to their father, etc.? Or are you someone who starts more at university and does a bit of tech transfer? What's your background? What's your story? And what leads you into being a health tech entrepreneur and leader like you are?
Well, in college, I was both an electrical engineer as well as anthropology major. And that I was really passionate, excited about both of these. And then when I finished my undergraduate degree, I realized that all the jobs that you could get with that kind of background were not anything that I was interested in doing. So I got really excited about AI. I was reading science fiction. I was doing all this sort of thing that one does when they're 20, and ultimately went on to graduate school in an artificial intelligence program, specifically a neural networks program in Boston at the time. There, I focused on computer vision. It was really a marriage between the electrical engineering side and more the anthropology, psychology side of things. And so from there, I did my PhD. I realized I wanted to be in industry. I was excited about healthcare. And so after my PhD, I went straight into the healthcare industry, starting at Siemens.
When was this? Because AI feels, in part relatively recent. And actually, there's been obviously a few waves of this, and not least the very recent wave with large language models and AI becoming really kind of mainstream. But when are we talking here? Because it seems like you're quite early to the party studying AI.
So I finished my PhD in 2003, so exactly 20 years ago. And it's funny. I hear that a lot. People say like, "Oh my God, AI didn't it just happen?" Actually, at the time though, it felt like we were joining at a time where there was already a lot of history, right? I mean, Alan Turing was working on AI in the 1950s, right? And there was a whole history. A lot of the neural network theory that we use today with these large language models and everything we think of as AI was developed in the 90s or even in the 80s. And so it was definitely out of favor at that time, and particularly neural networks were out of favor at that time. But there was a long history to it, and people had been working on it for a long time, and there was an increase in capability every year leading up to when I did my PhD, and then really every year since. So I think it's kind of burst into the public consciousness with ChatGPT in the last year, but there's been a really steady stream of progress, honestly, for the last 50 years.
It's quite funny, isn't it? I've spoken to a few people on this, like overnight successes, or it's almost similar to people that think someone's an overnight success. The actual work's been done for 10, 20 years in the background. And it's sort of similar with AI, I guess. I've had a couple of guests like Matteo Bellucci on here, who's been doing AI since the 90s and all of that sort of stuff. It's really interesting. So yeah, you go to grad school, you're studying AI, you're studying neural networks, computer vision. You graduate grad school, then what happens? So I imagine like the options aren't going to be huge, or maybe they are in terms of that. But it seems relatively niche. It seems it's not as if you can get a job anywhere doing these things, and especially with an interest in healthcare, which I'm interested in as well. Why you then pick healthcare? But yeah, what happens next in your story, and how does that lead to things like HeartFlow and things like that?
Well, at the time that I finished my PhD, there were really three application areas of AI at the time. There was military, there was security and surveillance, and there was healthcare. And certainly of those three areas, I was by far the most interested in healthcare. And the particular place where I did my PhD was really interesting because there were some people in the department that were very much on the neuroscience side of things, really trying to understand how the brain worked and try to model the brain computationally. And then there are people more on the application end. How do we take these principles? How do we take these ideas and apply them? So the training that I got during graduate school had a lot of biology, had a lot of neuroscience, had a lot of those elements of not healthcare, but biology and medicine. And that gave me a background in that area to a degree, at least, that really helped me see some of the excitement and some of the interest that ultimately propelled me into the healthcare space. But, I think you were also asking like, well, why Siemens and like why, who was doing what in healthcare at the time? And to be honest, like there were not a lot of groups that were doing it seriously. I feel very fortunate to have gone to Siemens when I did, because it was just this incredible collection of people who are at the leading edge of AI at the time, had all assembled within this group in Princeton. And we were really leading AI in healthcare for that, the 10-year period that I was at Siemens. And it was really amazing to be there because, so many people who went on to do other things in healthcare rotated through, some people as full-time members, sometimes people as interns, but it was a really interesting time to be there and just an incredible opportunity to be at the right place at the right time.
I've seen this a few times where there is this convergence of something like AI, a space, a technology, and then companies that attract lots of people that are interested in that, who then, as you say, get inspired, get educated, and then go on to do really interesting things. It's almost like they come in, they see and appreciate that something is possible. They see innovation, they see technology, new technology working. And there seems to be this kind of like belief that something can change. I've actually seen it and heard it a couple of times by people that have been involved in the music industry, where they've actually become entrepreneurs because they were part of a music industry, and they either came in, I mean, name your technology, right? They either came in at cassettes and saw it move to CDs. They came in at CDs and saw it move to mini discs. They saw mini discs get disrupted by USB sticks. They saw iPods disrupt everything. They saw, and seeing that this disruption is possible gives people, on the one hand, this appreciation that perhaps a career is quite fragile, and you might need to learn multiple different things. But on the other side, the appreciation and the acceptance that all of this can be disrupted by something that little old me could invent, or little old me could go to a startup that's got a wild idea and we could actually change the world. And it's so interesting that, and it sounds like Siemens was just that. And actually, with Babylon in the UK, with Babylon Health, going bankrupt, and there's this huge cohort of incredibly talented people. And you look at some of the things that they have gone on to go and do, even in the last few weeks, or if you look back to the last couple of years, the people that rotated through Babylon with the big vision and the big ideas and everything, and their ability to attract incredible talent. It's interesting to me that as a concept, that inspiration in those places, there seems to be these islands. If you look through technology and health tech, and these islands, like perhaps Siemens, as you've describing it, like Babylon, will be looked upon in the future and that kind of thing. But yeah, it sounds to me like Siemens was one of those, and I imagine, as you say, people have gone on to do great things.
Yeah, I think there's another element to it too, which was just the density of people and the breadth. I think partly it's because Siemens is an international company. It's a German company. And so we had people from all over the world that were passionate about AI and excited about AI. But I also remember talking to friends of mine in grad school who went on to academic departments, and they would say, like, well, I'm the only AI person in the department. I'm the AI faculty member. And I would say, like, wow, we've got 100 PhD level people working in this area from all over the world. And so I'm not the only one at all. Like, I'm specialized in certain areas, but there was an opportunity to just walk down the hall and talk to people that were, leading in various aspects of AI and had experience in actually trying to bring the technology out into the world, out into clinical practice.
I think there's a really interesting lesson in there for me about building companies. And actually, for the startups that are listening, for the entrepreneurs that are listening when they're building companies, perhaps I'm skipping ahead here now to all of the companies that you've built and been part of. Is that something that you can foster? Can you do that deliberately? Because we're playing in new technology, we're playing in new areas, that always with startups, we're trying to do something new. And you never want to be working in a silo, right? And actually, you want to foster almost the complete opposite. You want to foster like this environment where people are talking all the time and ideating and, bouncing off each other and more than the sum of their parts and that kind of thing. Have you found a way, or have you got strategies or tactics that actually foster that? Is that something that you took from your early career and moved into the companies later? I'm perhaps putting words in your mouth here, but I don't know. Is that a principle that you think you can foster?
I think you can, yeah. And I think, at least for me, what it comes down to is that great people want to work with other great people. And so there's a bit of a self-reinforcing loop. And also, great people want to work on something that is challenging and something that is meaningful and impactful. And so I think if you start a nucleus of people that are really driving for something big and driving for something hard, have like that Manhattan Project of trying to do something that's not quite possible yet, but really on the edge of what we can do. And you bring some amazing people together, that acts as a magnet to bring more and more amazing people together. And I think you really get this this chain reaction, this positive feedback loop where you're able to build an incredible environment. But I think those are the two key ingredients. You need that sort of vision, that sort of challenge, that sort of that impact, the potential for impact, and then you need a few key people to dive in and seed that new venture.
I absolutely love that. Great people want to work with great people. They want to work on something challenging and impactful. That's really, really nice. And it's interesting vision, right? You mentioned vision. And I think vision is one of those words that's thrown around that's like, oh, as a leader, as a CEO, as a leader, you need to be visionary. You need to display the vision. And I think people can, I'm a visionary. I create the vision. I set the vision, like all that sort of stuff. I don't actually think vision is necessarily something that you can just set and expect people to go on, because here, right, in this scenario that you've just laid out wonderfully, great people want to work with great people and they want to work on challenging and impactful things. Actually, being in charge of vision means you actually need to be in charge of all of that. You actually need to make all of that happen, because that is the role of the visionary. Yes, you can say we're going to be in this sector doing these things, and this is I want this to be our product mode, I want this to be our impact, I want this to be all these things. So you can kind of set the roadmap, I guess. But really, being a leader and being a CEO, which I'm going to talk to you about because you've certainly got experience here, is perhaps making sure you are putting great people with great people, and you are policing that, and you are hiring quickly and firing quicker. You are making sure that each of those individuals is doing something that is challenging for them, is something that they consider impactful, and knowing your employees enough to know what they think is impactful and all those different things. So yeah, I think that's really interesting. So can you, with that in mind, can you just tell me, like, how did you go then from the employee at Siemens to the CEO of Paige, and talk me through that journey?
My driving vision from the time that I left graduate school was to use AI to have transformative impact in healthcare. And that's what I set out to do when I left graduate school. And when I left graduate school, I had this naive idea that if you just build amazing technology, you can transform healthcare. And what I discovered very quickly is that amazing technology was important, but it wasn't sufficient. It wasn't enough. You also need to have a great user interface. You had to fit into the workflow. You had to understand the patient journey. You had to have reimbursement. You had to have FDA, and you have to protect the IP, and you have to do all these things. And every time I realized that there was this other barrier in order to drive impact with AI in healthcare, I said to myself, okay, well, I have to learn user experience, right? I have to learn how to do these sort of things so that I can actually fulfill my mission of making transformative impact with AI. And so through that time at Siemens, I kept learning all of these other skills. Siemens ultimately put me in management because they realized I could have a bigger impact by working with people than by directly doing the coding myself anymore. But, over that time at Siemens, I saw the technology, the AI technology, just increase and increase and increase in terms of what it was capable of doing. And I really saw the value shifting from hardware to software. And I felt that we could have a greater impact with really great software, really impactful AI in healthcare by investing in the software and focusing on the software. And fundamentally, Siemens is a hardware company. It's a big iron company. They build CTs, they build MRIs, they build ultrasound scanners, and they're really top in the world for doing that. And the software is great too, don't get me wrong. But fundamentally, you face this question, like, if I build this amazing software, does it work on every scanner? Does it work in every hospital? Does it only work on Siemens scanners? And there's no right answer to that question for Siemens, right? So I felt compelled to go somewhere that was purely a software company. And that's what led me to the Bay Area, to HeartFlow, where we built this cardiovascular diagnostic test for coronary disease that was a combination of AI and computational fluid dynamics. But this is a pure software product, right? So we relied on a cardiac CT, But we could work with any vendor of cardiac CT software. And we had certain requirements. We had certain patient prep requirements. But the technology really transcended the hardware and the acquisition device. And we brought that product through clinical trial and FDA and NICE recommendation, Medicare reimbursement. It was the first time Medicare had ever paid for an AI product in healthcare. And throughout that journey, I also realized that there was more to driving impact with AI in healthcare. It was not only the clinical trials and the FDA and the Medicare reimbursement and the NICE recommendation and the sales and the support and all of these other things. It was also, driving culture within a company, managing different groups of people effectively, organizational design within a company, things that, we really don't think of as technical topics. But ultimately, I was approached to join Paige.ai as the CEO, and I saw an opportunity to really take what I had learned and apply it to build an organization that could be delivering AI into healthcare. And so that's why I went from leading the technology and product at HeartFlow into that CEO role, because I felt that really having purview over the whole company gave me the opportunity to really drive the impact I was looking for.
That's awesome. So when you got into Paige, in fact, tell us about Paige. Tell us all about that. And then when you came in, what was Paige doing? Where were they? Versus what did you lead them through? And how did you find that? What did you learn in that period?
So Paige was a spin out of Memorial Sloan Kettering, one of the top cancer hospitals in the world here in New York City. And Paige had an exclusive license to all of the Memorial Sloan Kettering pathology data. So for those listeners who don't know, pathology is the branch of medicine where you take tissue out of a patient, you stain it, you mount it on a slide, and you do a diagnosis under a microscope. And Paige had access to this exclusive arrangement where we had access to all of the digital pathology slides from Memorial Sloan Kettering, as well as some IP and technology from Memorial Sloan Kettering. But the company had spun out, and they were looking for a CEO who had experience in AI, who had experience bringing things through FDA, driving AI into clinical medicine. And so that's how I got recruited into that position. When I joined, we had this data deal. We had IP licensed from Memorial Sloan Kettering. They had already done an initial funding round, but there was no product. The technology was, in an academic state. But really, when I joined, we had to build the core products, the core technology, and bring those through an FDA process and launch them. And so while I was there, I raised almost $200 million as the CEO of Paige. We built multiple products. We had the first FDA-approved AI system in pathology. We took Quest Diagnostics. We partnered with them, took them into a digital world. We launched these products in North America, Europe, and Brazil, and really took it from an academic situation into a real company with products on the market, and all the functions that are necessary to market that, to sell it, to support it, and to really be able to lean into the design and creation of these amazing products.
I want to ask you about scale in health tech, because I think it is a privilege afforded to the few to even have the opportunity to raise 200 million with a technology good enough, with everything else in the company good enough, let alone actually being able to go through with it like you did with Paige and achieving the scale that you did. There are many health tech companies that succumb to the valley of death, that gap between seed and series A, and even A to B is pretty dicey at the best of times. What would you say you learned about what it takes to scale to that level, to get to the point where you have real traction with sales, to make sure that you've got things that you've talked about already, the organizational design and things like that, but perhaps that's actually secondary to what actually gets you over the line with scale, what really matters when it comes to scale. I'm really interested in kind of how you see as a CEO going through that at that time. When you hear the word, when you hear the question, how did we scale? What actually comes to your mind? Like how would you rank the things, the departments, the actions, the luck, the timing, all of those different things? Like what comes to your mind when I ask you that question?
Scale is a combination of a few different things, right? So scale means you need to be able to distribute your product, right? You need to get it in the hands of hospitals, of doctors, of patients, and to be able to do that both, nationally in the US, but also internationally, you need to be able to get those products everywhere. So that's one part, is the distribution. The other part is that the products have to work in all of these different healthcare environments. And there's a lot of heterogeneity in the IT environments of different hospitals. There's heterogeneity in the practices of these hospitals. There's heterogeneity in the patient populations themselves. And so your AI needs to be robust. It needs to be able to work across these patient populations. But your tech stack and your infrastructure also has to be robust enough to be able to work across all these different environments. And then the third part of it is really the support, right? So if something's breaking, if somebody needs help, if somebody is trying to or requesting a feature all across that distribution network, you need to be able to respond to them. You need to be able to reply. You need to be able to bring in that feedback and actually triage it and make use of it and act on it effectively. And so it's really, to me, like those three elements. One is the distribution, being able to get your product in all these different places. The second is that robustness and being able to integrate your product into these different environments and these different patient populations. And then the third is to be able to support it and maintain it at that level. And the support also includes things like security and privacy and, being able to be compliant with all the local laws and all of these different areas, and nationalization in terms of the languages that you need to translate the product into. So like there are a lot of aspects to the scale that go beyond the AI itself.
When you say that you talk about robustness, okay, and I can understand that when it comes to, the tech stack and various different processes have to be robust and being able to deal with the things, and that runs into support and things like that. The first thing that you said actually there was AI. The AI has to be robust. Now, with your background, I'm hoping this isn't. I'm hoping this is going to be an easy question for you to answer. But when you say the AI has to be robust, and you mentioned patient populations there as part of the sort of quicker answer, but what do you mean when you say the AI has to be robust?
Well, I think there's a criticism that you can find pretty easily if you look in the medical literature and medical publications, where people say, AI is fragile. This company, this group, they built this AI technology, and then we took it from hospital A to hospital B, and it stops working, and it doesn't work anymore.
Right.
And so people use that as a way of attacking AI and saying like, this technology just like doesn't work, it's not robust, it's not ready for prime time, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's a misguided attribution of where the problem is. I don't think that is a problem of AI. I think that's a problem of whoever built that particular AI system. All right, like imagine you built a new drug and you only tested it on 50 people, and then you start, using it all around the world. You're going to find a lot of problems, and that's not an issue of medications, right? That's not an issue. That's not a problem of the pharma industry. That's a problem of whoever developed that drug and whoever okayed it to be used on this global population, right? And so you can build AI that is very robust, that appropriately samples the population, where you do multi-center studies and you do prospective trials and you do everything that you need to do in order to prove and validate that an AI system can be robust. And that's what you need to do in order to really build a clinical grade system. And that's what we did at HeartFlow. That's what we did at Paige. That's what we're doing at the new company at Jona. And that it can be done, but it's expensive, right? And it takes investment and it takes time. And a lot of people want to short circuit that. And it's very easy to convince yourself that because your system works on a few patients here, that you can just bring it anywhere and it'll work. I mean, that's wishful thinking, right? And I think the FDA in the U.S. has a very good regulatory framework for proving that you have to validate the product appropriately. So you can do it. It takes time. It takes investment, and I think some of the payment structures on the other end of that aren't fully worked out to justify that investment. But that's what I mean when I talk about robustness. Now, there's another side of it too, which I think is really interesting, which is, most doctors, like, they practice in a very small part of the world, right? You get your MD in London, and maybe you work in London, maybe you go up to Nottingham or Surrey or somewhere else, right? Maybe even out in Cornwall or Wales. But you're not generally going to sub-Saharan Africa. You're not generally going to India or Ecuador or the Inuit population in Canada. So you're really not seeing the same variety of anatomy and biology and physiology that exists in the human population. I think one of the really interesting and underappreciated elements of AI is that when you build these technologies and they start getting applied around the world, you actually find that there are very different anatomies, different physiologies, different aspects of healthcare that are just different in different patient populations. And if you talk to world experts in these areas, they're not aware of this because they just haven't had that sort of comparative experience across these different cultures. So I think it's interesting, both kind of on a human level and an anthropological level. But when it comes to actually building the technology, your technology has to be able to handle all this variation. And so I think any AI company that's doing their job well, that gets to that level of distribution scale, is constantly seeing anatomies, seeing patient populations that you never encountered before. And hopefully like the technology doesn't break, but you're learning things that allow you to improve the system and make it even better.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you think that at the minute, because of where we are with data sets and defensibility from getting good data sets and where we are with open sourcing or lack thereof, like, I kind of have this feeling that it comes down, the responsibility ends up coming down to those companies as needing to drive the quality of the algorithm, the data sets, the network. Like, it strikes me then that it's sort of the onus becomes on that health tech company themselves, and you're sort of trusting that they are going to have the right morality, to have the right internal values to drive the most variety and to avoid bias and all those types of things. Do you have the same feeling that that's where the responsibility lives? Do you think we're doing enough on the policing of those types of things, that it feels more kind of community policed than anything else? And where do you think that goes from here? You might disagree, but I mean, I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
Well, I think the company absolutely has responsibility, and I think we're not doing community policing. At least in the US, the FDA has really strict rules on monitoring. If you build an AI product, or forget AI, if you build a diagnostic test, right? This is a test for Ebola or whatever it is, right? And you say, okay, it's 95% accurate or 95% sensitive and 90% specific, and you go and you launch that in the world, you're obligated obligated by regulation to monitor that performance.
Mm-hmm.
And if your sensitivity drops below 95% and your specificity drops below 90%, you're obligated to figure out what's going on and address it, right? And if there's an adverse event that somebody takes your test and they have some issue that really is detrimental to their health, you're obligated to track and report these things with the FDA, right? And AI is no different, right? I mean, you build an AI product, you put it out there, and you go through an FDA pathway. You have all these same monitoring requirements. You still have a labeling. It says it does this, and it works at this level, and you have to monitor that that's true. And if somebody has an adverse event, you got to track that. You have to address it, and you have to figure out why. And so I actually think we go way beyond community policing. Like, yes, the responsibility lives with the companies, but I think the regulatory framework that exists today is absolutely sufficient to allow us to monitor and make these things safe.
Understood. I guess my question now is, though, what about how representative that is, though? So, for example, yes, I can understand that the FDA will clamp down, and similar, MHRA in the UK will clamp down on intended use and ultimate sensitivity, specificity in that example, or quality. But it's my understanding that you can actually get through those frameworks with a relatively narrow data set in terms of exactly what you talked about. That's not necessarily, in your example of that Ebola test, perhaps an Ebola test that works on a very specific demographic that's then more sort of applied in the marketing of the company or whatever, that this is a test that can be for everyone or perhaps used and that kind of thing. I'm just wondering kind of where you think we are on making sure that these tests, this AI, is actually widely applicable across demographics and across patient populations in order to be equitable and things like that. That I'm interested in, because I believe that isn't something that's necessarily enforced or any particular guidance around it in order to go through any kind of FDA process. And that does more fall to the companies themselves. I don't know. I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
Well, I think appropriately, people in society have been concerned about this issue, right? And we've seen all sorts of examples of AI being used in, HR hiring decisions or in, legal proceedings for like who gets on bail and who doesn't. And if there's a bias here, it can be very problematic. And so people look at healthcare and say like, well, wait a second, healthcare is even more important. There's even more patient risk. We really need to make sure that we address these issues. And I think what they don't realize is that healthcare has been dealing with this bias issue for a long time. I mean, this is an old demon within healthcare. And you can find books, you can find articles on underrepresentation of women in clinical trials for different drugs and different devices. You can find books and articles on underrepresentation of different minorities for different drugs and different devices. And, people did die in these situations, right? I mean, there's like a history, a litany of horrible situations that have happened. And as a result, the FDA and the international counterparts have put in place really strict guidelines on what needs to be done in order to validate a device across or drug across these patient populations. And the basic mechanism is whatever population you're intending to treat with this medical device or drug, you have to sample that population appropriately from a statistical standpoint. And any group that you think it may work differently on, the FDA is going to call out specifically to make sure that you sampled those and you do a sub-analysis and you have the right p-values to be able to prove that it works, right? And so both at HeartFlow and at Paige, we did de novo FDA approvals, which meant there was no predicate device or class 2 devices. And we brought these things through the FDA process. And I guarantee we had the FDA, we worked very closely with them, and they were very sensible and very reasonable. and also very strict to say you need to sample these populations. At HeartFlow, we claimed it didn't really matter whether you used a Siemens machine or a GE scanner or whatever to acquire the cardiac image. And they said, well, prove it. You have to sample, some of the sites have to be Siemens sites and some have to be GE and some have to be Philips. And you have to do a sub-analysis to prove that it actually doesn't matter. And so certainly things can slip through the cracks here. And like maybe there's some patient population that for some reason, like you don't anticipate has an issue, but that's why you've got the monitoring requirements. And again, that's no different than other drugs or devices in healthcare. So I actually feel like we've got a really strong framework here that works, and certainly something that I've had to operate in when I'm building clinical products. Now, just one more word on this, which is not everything goes through an FDA process, right? So if the hospital is making hiring decisions and they're using some AI software in their HR department, there's no FDA process. They don't require anything there, right? And so those software technologies that are not directly impacting patient risk, that don't have to go through this FDA process, there's not a regulatory framework for those. And one could argue maybe there should be. If you were to argue that, I would just say, well, let's not limit it to AI, right? If you use an AI process or you use, some other process in your HR system, and you're going to say it's unbiased, like, well, let's apply the same standard across the board and not single out the AI, because I think it wouldn't be sufficient to only target those processes for non-FDA healthcare technologies.
Indeed. It's really nice actually to hear that, because I think there's a lot said about regulators just generally. There's a lot kind of said about they're behind and they can't keep up and all these things. What you've actually described there is a really practical example, a couple of practical examples of actually exactly what the FDA has required of you, exactly what you've had to go for. You can see that you've got a great deal of respect there for the regulators, quite frankly, and that, as you say, there is a framework for which we have to comply, which is upholding a standard. Now, it's quite clear that standard's not going to be good enough for everyone. Of course, there's always things that everyone can do better in literally everything. However, I'm actually quite minded to say that from what you've just said, it does give me quite a lot of confidence actually in that process for a lot of these AI technologies that are going through. It is just a shame that we live in a world where still you can have pulse oximeters that don't work on black skin, but that is frankly exactly. Like ludicrous. But intended use, etc. But yeah, anyway, my point is, before I get down that rabbit hole, which I could go on for a long time on, and I will talk about in a different episode for those that do care about that. But yes, I think it's nice that there is a framework. It's nice that you have respect for it, and actually, it's nice to hear that of a regulator that at least we're on the right lines when it comes to AI and going forwards. I want to know about Jona. This is like really interesting. I want to know how you go from CEO at Paige, raised 200 million. I imagine in a very nice spot post money and growing a company and doing lots of interesting and cool things, to then moving into this next chapter. So tell me the story, tell me the generation of the idea and how you made the decision to go from that position to now this. Talk me through the whole thing.
So at Jona, we're focused on the microbiome. And the microbiome is all the organisms that live in your body and on your body. And it consists of bacteria, fungus, viruses, protists, archaea, a whole, group of different organisms. And it's something that I've been excited about for a long time, right? For a long time, we could only culture these organisms, and we were really limited in what we were able to see and experience and learn about them. With the advent of sequencing, 16S sequencing for bacteria, ITS sequencing for fungus, and now shotgun metagenomics, where we can really identify the DNA of all these organisms, and we don't need to culture them. It's opened up this incredible explosion of knowledge over the last decade, where the microbiome has been recognized to be associated with not only GI disorders, but basically every, tightly integrated into the immune system, every autoimmune condition, but also oncology, cancer, metabolic disease, obesity, longevity, which drugs work for which people. Even Parkinson's and Alzheimer's have been linked with the microbiome. Autism and mental health, depression and anxiety have both been linked with the microbiome. And yet the problem with the microbiome is that it's so complex. You have all of these organisms. They change dynamically. This particular strain can operate differently from a different strain within the same species. So the composition is complex, but also the literature is complex. Every single month, there are more than 2,000 papers published in PubMed on the microbiome. No human being can read all of these papers. So I really believe that AI was the right technology to be able to synthesize all of this data into meaning. I think if you look at the literature and you come to the conclusion that the microbiome is so impactful and so integral into your health, then I think the only way that we're going to understand what to do with it and how to use it is with AI. And so where we started is with a large language model, sort of like the backbone of a ChatGPT, large language model that reads all of this literature. And what we do is we offer a microbiome test and we sequence all of the fungus, all the viruses, all the fungus or the bacteria, and down to the strain level. And then what happens is the AI scours the literature and it finds all the diseases, all the conditions, all the symptoms, all the allergies, all the sensitivities, everything that's been shown to be linked to your microbiome, and produces a summary of all of that and cites the studies, tells you whether there's a lot of evidence for it or just early evidence for it. And then insofar as you want to change your microbiome and move into a better state, the AI scours literature and figures out all the actions that you might be able to take that have been shown to change your microbiome in a certain way that would be beneficial for you. It could be dietary, it could be lifestyle. But we also have a lot of evidence that shows that the state of your microbiome affects drug efficacy. It affects and which drugs you take affect your microbiome as well. And so the AI is able to pull all of that together and to summarize it into, again, what is known today about the kind of actions you can take.
That's incredible. And I have a million different questions to ask you on this. The first one is, how does this come about, going from the CEO of Paige to you wanting to start this? And the idea, you're entrepreneur in residence with a fund as well, aren't you? So is this something that the fund invested in putting you CEO of? Was this your idea? Talk me through that.
Yeah, so after Paige, I worked on the VC side. I had the opportunity to work with Jim Breyer, who is one of the great investors in technology. And Jim has gotten really interested in healthcare over the last few years. Paige was his first healthcare investment ever.
Oh, wow.
And so through that investment, I got the opportunity to work with Jim really closely. And he got very excited not only about healthcare, but specifically the opportunity for AI in healthcare. And so after Paige, Jim's made a dozen or more different investments in a variety of different healthcare AI companies. And so my role with him was to help him find companies, to diligence these companies, to understand whether the technology was meaningful, whether the business model made sense, whether the people that were building this had a good sense of the problem they were solving and whether it was worthwhile to solve. And then as Jim invested in these companies, to really help support them in various roles, board roles, advisory roles, and whatnot. And so that was my opportunity to work with him. And it was incredible just to see the breadth of different ways in which AI was being applied. But I knew that I wanted to start a microbiome company. And, to dial back to the beginning of our conversation, I've always wanted to drive transformational impact in healthcare with AI. And I felt that the microbiome was an opportunity where I could drive the maximum impact with this technology if we could get it right. And so the time that I was working with Jim, I was also learning about the space, learning about the current state of knowledge in the microbiome, really working on the business plan and the strategy for where we start. But the ambition for Jona is really to elevate the microbiome to a new branch of medicine where I believe that it can have a profound impact on someone's health, both from a screening standpoint, but also from a diagnostic standpoint. I think there may be opportunities to even cure some diseases in the future, and to really work with the life sciences and even the food and beverage industry on the development of new and better products.
I love this, and I want to talk about this in detail. So, the microbiome, you have just said you want to elevate it to a new branch of medicine. I think that's right. That's a grandiose statement, but that I think you're right to make. Like, I genuinely believe that the complexity of the microbiome makes it a frontier of medicine. It is one of what feels like few, the microbiome, the brain, there's a few, right, of these frontiers of things that we literally know hardly anything about. And you're right, the complexity of the microbiome means that where we are right now with AI and large language models, it seems like the marrying of two things there, that actually we finally have a technology that allows us to process the amount of data, information, etc., to even start to understand it. But it seems more achievable and finite in terms of the knowledge of the microbiome than something like the brain, which seems quite infinite, quite frankly. But the microbiome does seem finite and doable. There's just so much going on that in a world of quantum computing and large language models and these things, it starts to feel like, oh, we might actually get somewhere to understanding all of the processes here. And you're right, the first layer of that is looking at literature and going, well, who's tested A against B against C against D, and let's just try and find something here and try and find something actionable and all those different things. So I think this is awesome. My questions on this, my first one is, you mentioned the business model, you mentioned the strategy, spending a lot of time to figure that out. I'm interested in for what you can say, I'm interested in what the business model actually is here in terms of how this does make money, who you are defining as the customer and the payers, whether that's B2B, B2C, B2B2C, etc., and actually what the model is. I'm interested there. And as part of that, I'm interested in what your defensibility is, because I'm interested that in a world of how quickly large language models are moving, and, OpenAI saying only yesterday, I think it was, that they're going to be putting out these specific GPTs that people are going to be able to package and sell as specific GPTs for a specific reason, probably on 3.5, whatever, or maybe even 4. Like, what's your defensibility on what you've just described, bearing in mind what already exists as of today, yesterday, last week, but also where we might be in even 2, 3, 4 months or a year's time? So, yeah, talk to me about that.
So let's start with the business model question. So in this opening act of the company, we are offering this product, this test, this microbiome service as a cash pay model. So it's not reimbursed, it's not a medical device, it's not a diagnostic. It's a test where we sequence the microbiome, and then we summarize what the literature has to say, both from the association with these different diseases and connections, and but also on the actions that you can take to improve it. And that product is being sold. It's a wellness product. It's not a medical device because we're just summarizing that literature together. And we're selling it cash pay through concierge medicine, through functional health, integrated medicine, executive health, any cash pay aspects of the healthcare market. We also offer a version direct to consumer as well. that has some of the information. Some of the information we save only for medical professionals, but that we also offer this version direct to consumer. So this is it's a cash pay model. And the idea is that as we're able to generate some revenue, generate more data, see more samples, that will give us the fuel to really build clinical grade solutions as we go forward. Just knowing what it takes to go through the FDA, what it takes to build that clinical grade technology, it takes time and it takes resources. And those resources both in data and in revenue. And so starting with this cash pay model, I think we can offer people a lot of incredible benefit compared to what's out there today. And so this is where we're starting. Now, in terms of defensibility, I think that there are a couple ways in answering the question. So you dove into like technical defensibility. And so let me start there. People ask me this question a lot. They say like, well, GPT-4 is great and it can do all these different things. Like in a few years, we'll have GPT-10. And so why are you guys building anything here? Isn't it just going to like sweep away everything? And I think that is a misunderstanding of what the technology is capable of and where it's good and where it's not good, right? So if you break down our tech stack, it's really got three parts to it. So the first part is analyzing all of these papers and saying that this is a paper about Crohn's disease, and it was there were 100 subjects, and there was 50% men, 50% women. They did sequencing. They found that in the healthy population versus the Crohn's disease population, Crohn's patients had more E. coli and they had less Akkermansia and all these different things, right? And so the first part of our technology is just pulling out all of those keywords and understanding what this paper is about and what the findings were and what the patient population was and how the study was done, right? And then pulling all of that into the knowledge base. So that's the first part. The second part is now that you've read 200 papers on Crohn's disease, and they all found different things and they had different study designs and all this, then you have to put them all together in order to actually interpret somebody's microbiome tests and say, yes, you fit this profile of Crohn's because of these papers, or you don't. And then to be able to cite those papers. And then the third part is the generative part, where we generate a report for someone that is tailored for them, that is tailored for their own goals, which they tell us when they sign up. And there's that part too. And we've got a lot of plans for how to enhance the features on the generative side. And so if you take those three parts, I think GPT-10 or whatever we want to talk about, I think it can certainly help with the last part, right?
Yes.
I mean, trying to package this information into a version that is sensible for somebody to read and even interact with. I would say the core of what we do is the first and the second part from a technology standpoint, because no matter how good GPT-10 is, there's still, you need to put some framework into understanding what these papers are about and what they're studying and pulling out specific knowledge and being able to leverage that knowledge to interpret the papers. But then the second part of merging them all together in a way that allows you to interpret somebody's test results, that's really non-trivial. And I think a good analogy here is like if you were to go to GPT-4 today and you were to say, multiply these two 12-digit numbers, it'll give you an answer. And that answer is most likely wrong, right? And it's not because, and it's kind of like surprising to a lot of people, right? Because you say like, okay, well, this thing can build, a screenplay on X, Y, and Z, and it can write my college essays. Why can't it multiply two 12-digit numbers? It's a freaking computer. Like it should be able to do this. And we have, we've had calculators since the 80s that can do this, right? And so you say like, well, why can't it do that? And the reason is because large language models are not built for that sort of thing. And they can get it right to a certain degree. But what you really want is for the AI to say, "Oh, this is a calculation. I'll pull out my internal calculator and just do this and give you the right answer," right? But that's not how it works today. And so that calculator piece, I would say, is a good analogy to a lot of the technology that we're building at Jona. How do we actually put all of this information together to interpret somebody's test result? It's not obvious, right? I mean, that's basically like the calculator in this analogy. And I don't think that OpenAI is ever going to build that because it's not their business model, right? I mean, that they're building a platform, and we're very deep and verticalized in this application. And of course, we file patents and we file all these sorts of things as well. And as we generate more data, we have access to insights that an OpenAI is not going to have. But I think from a technology standpoint, we actually have a very defensible position.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's also, I mean, who's going to be leveraging GPT-10 best? It's going to be the people that leverage GPT-4 best, of course. It's going to be the people with that experience and all that kind of thing. And the moat behind you, even, of just the progress that you're making at this point. And as you say, just learning with the technology, and your tech stack is multiple. It's not just that element, but in it now, you will learn as those technologies increase in their complexity and ability as well. The other thing that's interesting as well to me was two things I want to talk about. The first one is the ambition to be a clinical grade solution. That's really interesting because, yes, the wellness B2C model is always fantastic at just showing a company, can I build something of value? Will someone exchange money for this service, which gives value? But yeah, having that ambition as well and starting where you are, knowing that's coming, how do you plot the path to there? What is it that you're doing now that gives you the opportunity to do that later? And the reason that I ask is because I imagine there are people that are thinking left, right, and center. I can leverage large language models and a couple of other bits to do X in a similar way to what you're doing, perhaps in a different place or in a different way. But how, with that in mind, what does that change about what you're doing now, what you're collecting, what you're doing, what you're showing, what you're keeping, etc.? Like what does that mean for how you're building currently with that in mind?
Well, as we move toward that future, we will always have an element of the company that is focused on the wellness industry and the cash pay industry, and working with these concierge docs and directly with consumers and patients themselves. So that's always going to be something that we do. It's not like we're going to move from there into a clinical world. For us, it's an and, right? We're going to take what we already have and build clinical products. And to build a clinical grade AI solution, it requires quite a bit of work, right? I mean, everything that we were talking about earlier in terms of being able to sample the population, to do a prospective trial, to do validation, and you have to specify a particular indication, right? With this initial wellness product, we take everything that's been studied in the literature, right? And that can be anything from, the microbiome's connection to celiac disease or to colon cancer, or it can be how meditation impacts your microbiome, right? I mean, there are papers on all of these things, and the AI is pulling all that together, summarizing it for someone to help them have that picture of their own health. As we think about a clinical grade solution, we have to really specify what is this product for? Is this a treatment? Is this a diagnostic? Is this, are we looking at your microbiome? And what are we doing with it? And who are the indications? What are the health economics of that? How does it get reimbursed? There's a whole set of other questions that are very specific compared to the product that we have now. And so our view is that these products work hand in hand. The touch point that we have directly with patients and with providers now gives us insight into the microbiome, into how the microbiome is related to a variety of different diseases or conditions or actions that people may take, collecting, as people have longitudinal samples, they retest over time, and we see the actions that they've taken and the impacts on their microbiome. It gives us a lot of opportunity to build those clinical grade solutions more effectively. So I see them really as working hand in hand. But starting with this wellness product where we can really deliver value to people immediately, given the complexity of the microbiome, the complexity of the literature.
And the learning that you go through with that model as well. I do think it's a great model. It gets a bit of heat, that model, actually, just because of like, are you just for the rich? Are you creating, digital poverty? Is this equitable? Like blah blah. Like, I understand those arguments, but I still don't think there's any getting around the fact that if you want to just get something to market quickly to see if it works, to then build your case for the system level business model, to build the data for your health economic model in order to bring it down, like bring it to everybody. I think, yes, there's no denying, as long as people have got those intentions, which is great. The final thing I want to talk to you about before I let you go is you mentioned a really fascinating concept to me here, which is when it comes to the microbiome, then working with the life sciences and the food and beverage industries. That is fascinating to me, because this now is talking about a real paradigm shift in the way that everybody, let's call it the public, thinks about their microbiome and how they contribute to it. Now, there are some companies that are doing this quite well, I think, at the moment, and there are some individuals that are doing this quite well, that are popping up on quite big B2C podcasts with companies like Zoe and others that, that are bridging this gap between the B2B world and the B2C world and bringing this information to the masses in terms of how people change their diet. And goodness knows, like, I was a medical student and we learned nothing about the diet. Certainly the microbiome was never even mentioned when I was at medical school, let alone like how people eat and nutrition and nutritional values, and all these things just aren't medical knowledge, and they're also not public. It's also not public knowledge. It's actually being driven, I think, more from the public, to be perfectly honest, and more from the B2C world. People of optimizing their health. Those people are really the ones that know most about supplements and eating 30 different grains per day and the effect that will have on your microbiome and these types of things, right? So when you talk about this synergy between the health tech that you are building with the microbiome, the life sciences industry, food and beverage industry, when you think about the synergy of those, what are you referring to there, and what does that look like?
It's a range of different opportunities. So let me give you a few vignettes, right? So with a company that's testing a new drug, right? They want to know, depending on which phase trial we're talking about, they want to understand who this drug is going to work best for. Mm-hmm. And so they collect a lot of biomarkers. They'll take blood, they'll take urine, they'll take all sorts of different aspects of those patients to understand, if somebody has an adverse event, right? If they don't do well on the drug, are there characteristics that the drug company can understand that characterizes those people? People who do really well on the drug, can they understand the characteristics that are going to drive that? And so, one very simple thing to do is the microbiome is just not even on that list today. Or if it is, they do a very simplistic analysis. They look and they say, okay, well, maybe there was higher E. coli here or Shigella or whatever it was, right? And so I think one opportunity is to really leverage the complexity of the microbiome and the knowledge base of what we know today in order to better elucidate, who's going to respond to these drugs and who's not, and, build better drugs and, ultimately bring them to market faster for the right people. So, that's just one vignette, right? Another is like on the food and beverage side, if somebody says, I want to build a product that's aimed at stress reduction, or I want to build a product that's aimed at gut health, or I want to, build a product that's aimed at, you name it, X. And they're trying to find the right ingredients to where they know that this is going to intersect with the microbiome in a way that is connected to whatever it is that they're going after. And they're looking for, how do we craft this product? How do we design this product? What ingredients should we use? What's known about how those ingredients are going to affect the microbiome? And then further, how the microbiome is going to affect whatever it is that we're targeting. that there are a lot of dots to connect there, right? The ingredient to the microbiome to the effect. And without, the AI, without this sort of knowledge base, it's very difficult to connect those dots. And so, in the context of designing this new product, I think we can help them connect those dots more freely and also say, well, wait, how do we figure out which ingredients are going to maximize health and really target the thing that we want to target?
I think that's awesome, because what that will end up driving is a very kind of evidence-based claims from companies in marketing, in this and that and the other, that those companies can actually feel that, hey, we've done the test and we've done the work, in fact. Because what you're actually talking about there is, it's a process. It's not necessarily, hey, we test it and give you a report and, try again later. That opens up to more of like a process to actually work with those companies to achieve something that a company could, like, if Coca-Cola dare come to you and say, hey, we want to create a product that does X result, can you help us work back from X result in terms of what the effects on the microbiome that would have to be and how we might do that in, this range of stuff that we can play in to put in the drink. Like, it's interesting to me, that, like, really interesting, because I think you end up in a place where you get a lot more value to the consumer through means by which the companies are willing to enter an evidence-based conversation. So I think that's really interesting, because again, you might end up creating like a meritocracy there as well, because there's a lot of, you'll know this, there's a lot of old wives' tales that come along with certain beverages and certain foods and certain that this does this and this has this effect and this has this effect, and you're feeling a bit nauseous, have some full fat Coke. Like, really? Like, what is this a thing? Like, if they can prove it, fantastic. But if they can't, then perhaps it elevates something that does actually have more value, etc. So there's a lot more value that I think can reach the consumers that way. That's a really interesting, really, really interesting model. But I've kept you for long enough here. I just want to say, Leo, thank you so much for coming on. This has been an absolute pleasure. You're launching Jona, or have launched Jona, incredibly recently. So do you want to just quickly tell the listeners how they can go about getting involved?
So we launched last week.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. And thank you also for all your what you're saying about the food and beverage industry and the impact that we're able to have. Someone can go to www.jona.health. You can find out more information about the company there. You can order your own kit. You can talk to your provider about it. And if they, please be in touch. I mean, you can always email us at hello@jona.health, or find me on LinkedIn or other socials. We're easy to contact. We're very receptive. We really want to hear from people, and we really want to build these products and these technologies in a way that has maximum benefit and maximum help to any individual who's trying to learn more about their health, trying to figure out problems that they're having, ultimately to optimize where they're going with it. So please be in touch. We are preparing a variety of different manuscripts to publish in the scientific literature, and there's a lot more to come.
Awesome. Leo, as I say, it's been a pleasure. I think you've got a heck of a background. You've obviously got experience doing so many different things in health tech. I think the future's bright. Like, with what you're up to with Jona, I think there's a lot of impact that you can have. I think that you're grounding in the science, you're grounding in the need for evidence and the use of evidence-based literature, seeking the evidence-based literature with what the AI is actually doing, but also just frankly, like, how much you know about AI. I think the fact that you're coming into this whole process, the whole tech stack, with your eyes wide open, I think you're an incredible person to be doing what you're doing. So thank you for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you so much, James. It's been fun.